Is on the line this morning. Good morning to you, Nathan.
How are you, lads?
A mixed response, it's fair to say, across the newspapers and the columnists this morning, and from everybody who's watching it. Outright optimism from some quarters, fairly hard-bitten cynicism in other quarters. What was the actual general sense yesterday as this began to unfold? Because I think as they began to talk, it became relatively clear what the new roles were going to be and how everybody was going to interact.
Well, I think that was the main takeaway from yesterday, that they pretty much cleared up any ambiguity about what was going to happen, because the cynicism and the confusion that was there on Saturday night when reports started coming out of this pretty much unprecedented deal, and that Mick McCarthy was in the dark on it, and then half an hour later he's suddenly very aware of it. You wonder what's going through Mick McCarthy's head. If he thought, like every managerial job, I go in, I do a good job and I stay on until it goes horribly wrong, whereas this is just 2 years regardless. They cleared that up yesterday. I asked John Delaney there. He says it is watertight. No matter what happens, come 2020, Stephen Kenny is going to be manager of the Republic of Ireland side. So I think everybody's quite cautious in this, because it's football, it's Irish football. 1,000,001 things can happen over the next 2 years. There's any amount of potential stumbling blocks. There's the obvious ones that people talk about. But again, think of all the things that have happened off the pitch in Irish football over the past year. All these little things can crop up and can raise questions about Mick McCarthy during his 2 years and about Stephen Kenny's suitability over the next 2 years. And we'll hear from Stephen Kenny today. And that's going to be important, I think, because what does Stephen Kenny do for the next 2 years? Do you just keep your head down and keep as quiet as possible and make sure nothing goes wrong that puts you in a position where people are questioning whether you should be Ireland manager? Because his stock is so high now. I'm just wondering what he can do over the next 2 years to increase his reputation outside of the FAI, maybe inside the FAI, and that's what it's all about, is convincing the board and convincing John Delaney and proving that you deserve this opportunity. But outside of that, I don't think there's anything he can do with the under-21s that make him more suitable for this role than he is right now, because the Irish under-21s isn't the same as the England under-21s. And all right, the Irish under-21s has been a mess for well over a decade at this stage, but you can't set out to qualify because you don't have your best players. If you do get a brilliant crop, the best of them skip the group. So it's very hard to do any sort of long-term planning. So I just wonder where Stephen Kenny goes over these 2 years. Do you literally just put the head down and say nothing and wait your turn?
I think the under-21s shouldn't be underestimated as much as people are, because we've a fairly fluid kind of bunch of players here, where I don't think many players are guaranteed a place in this Irish team. We're just not good enough. Like, say for example, the likes of Ryan Manning, who was playing in at championship level, who was playing for the under-21s, but is a player that certainly could progress, and we could have players that just surprise you. I think Kenny taking over the under-21s now, Nathan, there's going to be a lot of interest in these under-21s that certainly wasn't there before. I mean, we lose 6-0 to Germany, and apparently the players are kind of not particularly well coached, and the Germans got into the game and nobody cares, because as the under-21s, we've never qualified for anything. But now, because we're looking at the successor here, we're looking at the heir apparent, I think there will be a lot more scrutiny and a lot more people even going to watch the Ireland under-21s play. And I think Kenny will have an open mind in terms of players that he brings into the under-21s who he thinks actually could be latent progress be made with them onto the senior team. And I wouldn't underestimate the importance of how he gets on with under-21s. Notwithstanding, it's nothing to do with the senior team in the next 2 years, but it's like, I want to see what the under-21s are doing now, and I will take a very special interest in them under Kenny.
I agree with you that there will definitely be far more scrutiny of the under-21s. I just don't know if it's going to be fair scrutiny at times. Ideally, what you do see is Stephen Kenny fostering a culture in these young players of a style of play, of the sort of freedom he always talks about that he wants Irish footballers to play with, to show their technical capabilities, and he gets that into their heads when they are 18, 19. And remember, if this goes well for Stephen Kenny, he could be there in 6 years' time, where these 18-year-olds will be 24 and very much a part of his senior team. So you want to foster that. I just think if people are going along to games and suddenly expecting results, that there's no guarantee. Even if he's doing a good job, if his best players are taken away from him at under-21 level, or if the players simply aren't there, if Mick McCarthy decides he wants to give the best of that under-21 crop a chance, if he decides he's going to keep Michael Obafemi in, Leo Connor in, Kevin Kelleher in the main squad, they're probably three of the key under-21 players. for the next few years. If Stephen Kenny doesn't get them, how can we judge him on the results of the team? I think you would like to see a style come through. The people who go and watch the under-21s would like to see some sort of cohesion. And as you say, Johnny, it looks as though they've actually put some work in on the training ground and they know what they're about.
Well, so I think I think the style is the key thing. Any sense of organisation and philosophy coming through early on would be great. But we don't know yet exactly what the nature of his relationship with the other underage teams is going to be. He seems to be inheriting a bit or taking over a bit from what we had assumed Ruud Doctor's job would have been. What was the clarity around that? And I guess that's kind of one of the main things to get cleared up today.
No, there was no great clarity about that because, and I was speaking briefly to Ruud Doctor, and listen, the FAI message on all this was very much, it's for the good of Irish football. It's a team. Everybody comes together. It doesn't matter about roles. It doesn't matter about titles. It's about everybody coming together for the betterment of Irish football. But as you say, like this is, in a way, this is suddenly a huge job that Stephen Kenny has for the next 2 years. If you're in charge of all the men's underage teams, like it's a brilliant position. It's a position I think people said maybe someone like Brian Kerr should have in recent years. But it was a position that we felt didn't exist because it was part of Ruud Doctor's gig. But it's only for 2 years that Stephen Kenny has it. So, as you say, these are the questions that will crop up over the next couple of years. Is this now a permanent appointment? So when Stephen Kenny goes to the senior role, is somebody going to step in and replace him as under-21 manager in charge of all the underage teams? I'm not quite sure. I'm not sure if that's been thought through fully as to where it goes after the next couple of years.
It's interesting as well because Paul Lennon writes today that he believes that Alan Reynolds is going to go along as Kenny's assistant whilst possibly holding on to the Waterford United job because it's obviously a part-time gig and it's very poor, very lowly paid as well. But it will be interesting to see how Kenny works with Colin O'Brien and Tom Mohan because from my little knowledge of the other two guys, I think they will have a very good relationship and I think they will have the same goal in mind, to the betterment of the senior team down the line. And they've all a similar enough kind of League of Ireland background, and Mohan and O'Brien seem to be doing good jobs. And I do think Kenny, I think the three of them in particular will work closely together.
You definitely hope so. And maybe the fact that Stephen Kenny is there and there is this longer term plan appeases any of those problems that there are at underage level. Even if Mick McCarthy does come in March and goes with the exact same squad again, doesn't go with any youth, doesn't really have time to take a huge interest in the underage system, at least you know Stephen Kenny is there and it's his day-to-day job is to be around the underage team. So you would hope that actually Kenny gives all those coaches a little bit of belief, even from the simple fact that he's spent his time working in Irish football and has been able to make it right to the top of the pyramid.
Yeah, I think that's kind of one of the key things that can't be... Well, I suppose we had it a bit with Brian Kerr and there was a short honeymoon period. I'm not sure that the league was set up then to deal properly with the opportunity that it had.
Definitely, yeah.
It feels now that at least the crazy spending of the early noughties is gone, that the licensing, however controversial that has been, has prevented clubs from going completely into debt to try and make progress. And so now, if you are a young manager, you can look at the League of Ireland as a career path.
It's a huge victory for the League of Ireland, what's happened here, you know, and there was general disappointment. We had the bizarre situation of Patrick's Athletic and Derry obviously officially endorsing Kenny for the job. No, I'm not going to get into that. But
go on quickly, because people think that's BS, that they shouldn't have done that.
I don't know what the motivations were. I think it was very strange, to be honest. I mean, it certainly would, in theory, suit St Patrick's and Derry if Stephen Kenny were not managing Dundalk.
Is it not reminiscent of the scenes outside Leinster House when all of Offaly stormed it the day that Brian Cowan was made Taoiseach? Is that not exactly what it is? It's our community gets to be the leader for a change.
Possibly. I don't think it was a particularly wise thing to do.
Everybody criticised that at the time, going, look at these. Look, whatever I understand it though, right? I don't think there were. I don't think I'd say it wasn't an underhand thing what was going on. I just don't think it was a particularly wise thing to do because Dundalk wake up this morning and they have lost their leader. Whatever Dundalk's odds were to win the league next season, they've changed now and they've definitely gone bigger because we don't know who's going to manage them. But for the League of Ireland, for Stephen Kenny to go from... The League of Ireland was a laughingstock for much of my lifestyle, for much of my lifetime, and still for much of my lifetime. But it's come to a position where, possibly partly because our international team has regressed as well, and a lot of League of Ireland players maybe who wouldn't have had the opportunity are now getting a chance, or ex-League of Ireland players. For Kenny to go from Dundalk almost straight into the Irish international job is huge for the League of Ireland, and from next year on, when we've under 13s, under 15s, under 17s and under 19s at national level,
Stephen Kenny will not be neglecting that either. He will be looking at all of that and saying, how does this work towards the betterment of the international team? And it's a very proud day for the League of Ireland, because Alan Reynolds now, who's the Waterford United manager, can say, well, hang on a sec, like, I'm going from Waterford United to now being assistant potentially to Stephen Kenny at the under-21s. I wonder, have I a chance now of being his assistant maybe for the Ireland team in 2 years, 3 years time? So I think for the League of Ireland, this is huge, and I think that's probably what St Patrick's and Derry were getting at, despite the bizarre nature of the public.
Well, Stephen Hunt said it set the league back years. I don't agree with that.
No. Stephen was just, he was way over the top there. Like, and in fairness, like, I've gone to games with Stephen. He's not anti-League of Ireland or anything like that. He just probably thought it was a bit bizarre, but I just think the clubs could have maybe been a little bit wiser and just kept their counsel to themselves.
What did you make of that, Nathan? Because it was an interesting little subplot to the whole thing.
Yeah, I didn't think it was that big a story. I thought it was a little bit bizarre, all right, seeing St Patrick's Athletic coming out saying that, yes, you should take the manager of the #1 team in the country. But, listen, it does show that I think everybody in the League of Ireland is behind. And I think that was one of the major, probably, concerns I had with rushing into Mick McCarthy, was that it's not a very tangible thing. But I do think this filters down all the way through Irish football, that people believe that, like, it's not a real thing, but that they have some sort of influence. That everybody knows Stephen Kenny. Stephen Kenny's been around the block for so long. They have a strong personal connection with him. And that filters down to the actual grassroots, that they feel as though somebody within their sphere has made it to the very top. And they have that connection. And it gives them that a little bit of hope that I think has been lost under Martin O'Neill. And I think even before that with Giovanni Trapattoni, that the connection between this Irish group, these Irish players and the management had gone totally, and they'd just become fed up, whereas I think Stephen Kenny brings that back.
I'm just slightly worried, Nathan, about Mick's kind of attitude towards the League of Ireland, because the likes of, I would say, McElhenney should be a candidate for the squad, and I'm not sure Mick has any interest in bringing present League of Ireland players in, including, say, Michael Duffy, who obviously was touted by O'Neill.
Because they
sorry, he's in a difficult position in that sense, in that the first
time
games
is of the
March,
essence as well. Like.
The League of Ireland only comes back at the end of February, and that was brought up as to how do you judge those players when you're not really going to have a chance to see them. But again, you would imagine Stephen Kenny's going to have some sort of influence. He's now in the room to make those points, to have that conversation and say, listen, Michael Duffy and Patrick McElhenney, you don't need to play them, but they will add to the quality of training here. They will add to the level of training. They will bring something slightly different. And you would expect over the course of the 2 years, some of those players will come through, simply, if nothing else, due to the lack of talent that there is elsewhere, but that they will get their chances. And if not, at least for those players, again, you're thinking, well, in 18 months, 2 years, there will be no excuses.
Nathan, good stuff. Thanks very much.
Cheers, lads.
It's Nathan Murphy there, who was at the Aviva yesterday for the 2 press conferences. Darren's going to be at the press conference today when Stephen Kenny is unveiled, and it will be interesting to hear.
Definitely, as I say, he's bang for his buck there, and just what Nathan alluded to there, like, you know, you just envisage a scenario of Stephen Kenny advising Mick McCarthy on anything, and you're just like, Mick would be a stubborn, you know, northern Englishman in his own way as well. Obviously, he's Irish, but he's from the north. You know, was born in around Barnsley, I think, and he's a stubborn character, I'd say, in his own right. Stephen Kenny would be maybe a little, quite strong-minded, but also quite kind of almost shy and introverted in ways. And
I don't know if it'll be advising necessarily.
Yeah, or even they might have a chat over a coffee, but that sort of stuff, I'm not sure how that's going to work. I think
no, because The thing is, right, the international manager's job was always to qualify for tournaments. But there was always this sense that, oh, they should be doing stuff. I felt like it would have been great to have O'Neill and Keane injected more into the grassroots, but it's not really possible. So what's going to happen is it'll be McCarthy's job to qualify for the tournament. And in the meantime, Stephen Kenny can be like this kind of link between that and the rest of the organisation. Maybe, if it works, that's what happens. If it doesn't work and they fall out in the second coffee, then it's 2 years of waiting around to get your chance. Any one of these and across a spectrum of outcomes is possible.
I'm just trying to envisage what the headline will be from Kenny's press conference, like what the main story, because it could be anything. It could be, as you say, it could be from Father, or it could be from Peter McVerry to, you know, Martin O'Neill. I've no idea, generally no idea, but Kenny will go into that press conference, and I know this from Kenny, he'll go into that press conference with a message he wants to get across, and whether he's asked about that or not, he will get that message across.